They look good. Well, Alinghi Red Bull Racing looks okay.
Yeah, I think they're the only team still on the foils, as they will just rip it. They're coming over towards the right, so they have to do a jibe and come back to the line to keep their foiling advantage. We can see New Zealand and Italy are off the foils. USA and France are off the foils, as are GBR. Only one boat foiling as we come up with, I haven't got a clock, back onto the foils with 12 seconds to go. And this is for Alinghi Red Bull Racing. If they can maintain foils, they're going to be strong. But they're still heading away from the start line. So coming up to the
This is the umpires. OCS, GBR, New Zealand, Italy, and Swiss. You all have to restart.
Wow.
GBR clear.
All those boats are behind the line. GBR are clear. You can see GBR clearly behind the line. The rest are still to return. Glenn, that was a pretty tricky start, and Alinghi Red Bull Racing, they're coming back foiling. They must be looking strong.
The only boat on the foils, they went out, they did a beautiful manoeuvre, and the other team's deciding to low ride back to the line. So Alinghi coming downwind here, they have to get across the start line to leeward, make sure the boat's fully across, get the electronic diamond across the start line itself, which it looks like they're doing now. They'll harden up onto the breeze here and try and get through the line to actually start. So they're actually in pretty good shape at the moment.
So we do have a start in race number 2 of this preliminary regatta, and the one team that are up and falling at this point are Alinghi Red Bull Racing. The majority of the fleet working to get up on the foils and get back over the line to count in the points when it matters.
Yeah, this is going to be an incredibly tricky race. I think a lot of sweaty palms in those boats while they're waiting for a little bit of pressure just to get the boat up on the foils. But we're looking at Alinghi Red Bull Racing here. Be interesting to hear their comms coming into this boundary and how they put the tack in.
So Alinghi Red Bull Racing with a solid tack and looking stronger than the majority of the field, the fleet.
Oh, they did that beautifully. They've got the apparent wind forward, apparent wind angles well forward, apparent wind speed is high because they're foiling, and they can just use that momentum of apparent wind speed to keep the boat flying. All the boats behind them are off the foils, and if Alinghi Red Bull Racing can keep going here and not fall off the foils.
Yeah, I wouldn't count your chickens yet, Peter. This race has got a long way to go. It's not over till it's over. It's going to be some tense moments still to come, I think.
But when we talk about teams that have pulled a surprise on day 2, maybe it's going to be Alinghi Red Bull Racing, following on from what Orient Express Racing did in the opening race. So just take a look. We're on leg 1 of 4 going upwind, and it's Alinghi Red Bull Racing, Orient Express Racing sitting marginally in that P2 position, followed by Ineos Britannia, American Magic, Emirates Team New Zealand, and Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli.
So we might ask the question, how come Alinghi Red Bull Racing are the only boat foiling? Well, in the pre-start with 1:30 to go, they were foiling, and they just managed to zigzag their way across the wind, keep foiling. Although they were late for the start, their priority was to keep the boat elevated, and they did that really, really nicely. In the meantime, everyone around them had touched down. Now they are reaping the benefit.
Yeah, they are racing up the middle of the course, although they are approaching the next boundary, so it's going to be a big moment here again for them as to whether they can get through that tack and stay up on the foils. And it looks to me they've just managed to do it. Glenn, can you just talk us through what they're doing in these really light air tacks to just keep the boat up and foiling?
Oh, these guys, they're just on the edge of coming off the foil, but I think they've managed to stay up. They were just right on the edge there. Really, really you know, they would have been literally white knuckling it to dig that out of the hole, and they have in that tack. That was a really impressive light air tack. The other teams are still low riding, so with Alinghi being able to stay on the foils, you know, in that pre-start, which was largely set up by their shore teams and their on-water teams, they can stay on the tow line until 3 minutes to go. So all boats were getting pulled behind their chase boats, their pit crew, if you like, and that choreography of that setup is absolutely key to putting yourself in the right position. That positioning of your pit crew is absolutely crucial, and what we're seeing at the moment is they've just got up on the foils, managed to stay up, bridged a few lulls in the breeze, and they're extending away upwind. So this next manoeuvre for them will be absolutely critical.
Now, Glenn, they're heading over to the left-hand boundary. Can they get far enough into the boundary to lay that top mark gate?
That's a really good question, Peter. In these conditions, the angles change a lot. You only go up and down 0.2, 0.3 of a knot, and your lay lines change massively. So their software that they'll be looking at, which actually helps them get to those top marks, will be moving around a lot as the wind goes up and down. So they'll be very much sailing a heads out of the boat type of day and trying to sort of best guess, if you like, what that software will be indicating to them going forwards, and also looking up the track to be able to see what's coming down. They're just pulling off another tack now, watching them go through. I think they've managed to keep the boat on the foils, but again, it will be absolutely touch and go. If they can get to the top around the top mark, they should be able to make it downwind in good shape and we'll be gone.
Might turn anyway all the way down, and we'll see where it ends. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez quand on doit faire des virements ou des jacks? We'll see, Max, but we are ready. Revise the maneuvers. Going all the way to the right margin.
Well, they are touch and go on this ley line coming in here. We don't want to see a repeat of what happened to Emirates Team New Zealand in the first race, where they were really tight on the ley. They had to come up, they slowed down, the boat fell off the foils, but it just looks like they're going to get round okay here.
Alinghi Red Bull Racing are showing the fleet their tail, and they will be the first around the top mark in race number 2 in this preliminary regatta. The rest of the fleet are looking in wonderment, as saying, how are you doing that? All Alinghi Red Bull Racing is saying as well, we're doing it. Catch us if you can. They're handling this extremely well.
Just keep the boat elevated, avoid the touchdown, and I think Glenn touched on a very, very smart point about the battle of the chase boat drivers, and at what angle do they release the boat at that 3-minute countdown pre-start, because right now that is the big moment. Alinghi being able to be on the foils for the whole 3 minutes in the pre-start as they go into their first jibe. A little bit of windward helm there. We look at the boat speed of Alinghi Red Bull Racing. It's just about, is it starting to drop? We're looking for an acceleration. Yes, it's starting to come back up.
Touch and go on board Alinghi Red Bull Racing. That was as close as it comes, but they managed to keep it up on the foils and through that first jibe, racing down the downwind leg.
Quite simply, Alinghi Red Bull Racing at this race looks slick.
They've learned. There's been some pretty serious analysis of what they learned on that first practice day. Oh, second boat up, so it's Emirates Team New Zealand. They've managed to get their boat up foiling. Can they hold it up there? Once the boat starts foiling, and it's at about 17 knots, speed increases, they get the boat up on the foils. And the next crucial moment for Emirates Team New Zealand will be this first tack as they come towards the right-hand boundary. Nice tack.
So two boats foiling. Alinghi Red Bull Racing and now Emirates Team New Zealand, who are yet to make the top mark, as Alinghi Red Bull Racing are heading on down the second leg.
Now New Zealand have Orient Express Racing right on their bow. They are electing to sail to windward, and the windward boat, in terms of the rules, is required to keep clear. There's not an issue there now, but it is incumbent on Emirates Team New Zealand to keep clear to windward as they sail past Orient Express Racing.
Yeah, I think that was a really smart call from Emirates Team New Zealand. You know, that it was really risky to go below Orient Express Racing just in case that wind... what's the word? What am I looking for, Peter?
The wind drops, they fall into a hole.
The wind shadow, my mind went there. The wind shadow from Orient Express Racing could have just crippled the wind enough to take them off the foils, but they managed to keep foiling and get past, and they are now comfortably in second place.
2 boats foiling. We've got Alinghi Red Bull Racing on leg 2, heading down to the bottom mark. Now Emirates Team New Zealand managed to get their boat out of the water without the assistance of the chase boat. I think that's significant, that they can release the boat in this amount of air. But here's our race leader, Alinghi Red Bull Racing. They haven't put a foot wrong.
Alinghi Red Bull Racing are in full race mode, and that's what we want to see of these AC40s. We did say the most important thing was they're all identical boats, but how good your team is will determine where you finish up.
Glenn, just the ability to get, it's one thing to get towed up onto the foils. To actually sail your boat up onto the foils, that's a pretty big challenge for Emirates Team New Zealand, and they pulled it off.
Yes, it definitely is. It's, you know, they just managed to get into a slight little bit more breeze, you know, than the rest of the fleet. And I'm just watching Alinghi at the moment, and I think they may have pooched that jibe, and this will be massive in the race for them. They just didn't quite pull off the jibe. Emirates Team New Zealand now still foiling at the top of the course. Alinghi are going to have to get on their diggers and dig themselves out of a big hole. They're going to need a big excavator bucket on here to get up and going, because Emirates Team New Zealand are charging at the top of the course, and they'll mow them down super quickly here.
Yeah, confirm that one, Glenn. They are well off the foils, Alinghi Red Bull Racing. So the rabbit's on its way to catch it potentially. The Emirates Team New Zealand have rounded the top mark and are now chasing down Alinghi Red Bull Racing. The other 4 boats in the fleet still struggling to get up on their foils.
Stephen, this reminds me of race 7 of the America's Cup, the 36 America's Cup, where you had massive lead change. As look at Alinghi Red Bull Racing, they had windward heel, they had a lot of drag from that windward foil, and that just meant touchdown. And that is just the difference between doing an excellent jibe and just not quite getting the timing right, and they settle down into the water. Now they've got the challenge. Can they get their boat back on the foil? Can the New Zealanders keep foiling as they come down leg 2?
If you remember race 7 and the match, Emirates Team New Zealand were actually stuck at the top mark, and Luna Rossa was stuck at the bottom mark. At least this time, if you're a fan of Emirates Team New Zealand, they're up and flying.
Yeah, but it's the same deal. There was a leg in it, remember, at race 7 of the last America's Cup, and the New Zealanders managed to foil, and Luna Rossa at that time fell down into the water, and we're seeing that same situation here.
Kind of look like they're almost going to take off. Yep, they're airborne just to leeward of us. Alinghi's still off the foil. The catch. It'll win this way, eh? Actually, yeah, it looks real good on the boundary. Worse at the top mark and top right. Actually, just top mark in general. Still your catch with basic. Oh, sorry, mate. So keep it deep through the low. We're about 40 out. We'll just pace it upwards to the top. Yeah. Bloody light here. Reckon we'll get any better? There's going to be more wind in 10, I reckon, just slightly, but need the pace for it. I'm starting to think about pacing up now. Yeah.
Emirates Team New Zealand now on the hunt of Alinghi Red Bull Racing in race number 2 of the first preliminary regatta for the 37th America's Cup. Alinghi Red Bull Racing got off to an absolute flyer, then basically fluffed the jibe on the second leg of 4, and finally Emirates Team New Zealand got up on their foils, and they are coming hard at them. We're almost halfway through race number 2.
Just have a look at Emirates Team New Zealand's jibe as they come through. They'll be mindful. trying not to touch down. Alinghi now sailing displacement mode to the bottom mark gate. New Zealand are doing double the speed, so the displacement mode, they're doing just under 9 knots. If you're in foiling mode, you're in the mid-20s. It's a huge speed differential with the foiling technology, with the ability to foil. There it is, only 7 knots for Alinghi.
Yeah, it's going to be a pretty tense moment on board Alinghi, watching Alinghi Red Bull Racing, watching Emirates Team New Zealand charging them down, closing the gauge very, very quickly here. I think we might see an overtake.
Yes, but we've also been known not to jump to conclusions with the wind, the way the wind has been going today here in Vilanova. But on the face of it right now, Emirates Team New Zealand will, Hannah, overtake Alinghi Red Bull Racing at the completion of the second leg of 4 here in race number 2.
And for New Zealand, they have to be mindful. They don't want to get tangled up with Alinghi Red Bull Racing. The priority for Peter Burling and Nathan Outridge will be to keep the boat on the foils as they actually go quite deep so that they can come back at the right-hand mark quite hot. They won't take the left-hand marker, they'll take the right-hand marker so that when they do that rotation of turn round the mark, they actually do not stall out. So Emirates Team New Zealand take the lead at Mark 2.
Confirmation, Emirates Team New Zealand in the lead of race number 2, and Alinghi Red Bull Racing attempting to get back up on the foils. Third position, Orient Express Racing, followed by American Magic, Ineos Britannia, and Luno Rossa Prada Pirelli. Oh, how that must bite if you're Alinghi Red Bull Racing.
So just listening to the race management team there, the race, I believe, has been shortened to 3 legs, so they will finish at the next upwind gate.
So top mark finish. So it's Emirates Team New Zealand on the final leg now.
The big moment here for me is that the New Zealanders were able to, without assistance from their chase boat, get the boat on the foils.
This is the race committee. This race has been shortened to 3 legs. Finish at the windward gate.
We're on the last leg, 3 legs, top mark. Ian Murray and the race committee will reposition. The challenge for Emirates Team New Zealand will be to keep the boat on the foils. Glenn, harder to keep the boat on the foils upwind or downwind?
Yeah, look, basically when it gets to a really, really marginal position, you end up sailing really quite wide, so almost across the wind. So when you're sailing and you're tacking, you're basically not sailing back through your dirty air like you can do sometimes when you're going downwind. That dirty air, when you jibe and you've got to come out, back out pretty much at 90 degrees, you actually end up sailing back through your own gas or your own vortex off the mainsail. So in some senses, it's actually easier to tack. Emirates Team New Zealand coming along here now, they're sailing the boat really, really nicely. They've generated a lot of apparent wind here and they've got the sails depowered. They're certainly not sailing at max power because they've managed to accelerate the boat. All the other teams are trying to get max power out of the sails to take off. Emirates Team New Zealand up and foiling, sailing very much now in a depowered state, reducing drag, making the boat sail faster through the water, which is actually generating more airspeed over the rig. So the faster the boat goes, the more power they have. It's a bit like a supercharger in a standard engine.
Manoeuvres are an area where you will touch down. Glenn, are they the next tack? Can they get far enough into that boundary to ley line the top mark to the finish?
Just watching them come over to this boundary now, I'm about 100 metres away from where they are, and they'll be setting up for a tack here any time from now. And this tack probably is the tack of the race. If they pull this off and they can get through this a little bit lighter at the moment, you know, that'll be basically the race for them. So they're setting up for a tack now, accelerating, board going down, spinning the boat, keeping a nice high ride height, managing the heel really well. This will be the critical next 10 seconds. The bustle touches, but I think they've just got enough into bank there with a beautiful entry to pop the boat back out, reduce that drag. It's a bit like DRS in a Formula One. The DRS system is effectively getting on the foils. That's the drag reduction system. So they'll be powering the sails up through the initial part of the build phase, depowering the sails as they're accelerating, and they'll be basically going right across to the other boundary, trying to sail as fast as they can to make sure they can pull off the next manoeuvre to get round that top gate. It's basically through the top gate, which becomes the finish line in this particular race.
And to use Glenn's analogy of DRS, if you've got the fast boat, you've got DRS as well, no one's going to catch you. So Emirates Team New Zealand heading for home in race number 2. The race shortened to 3 legs, so they'll finish upwind. Alinghi Red Bull Racing still struggling down at the bottom mark after having led for at least 1.5 legs. The remainder of the fleet sailing around, but not the right direction.
Yeah, it's really tough for the rest of the fleet out there in displacement mode, especially watching Emirates Team New Zealand doing such a great job of keeping the boat up on the foils and getting through the manoeuvres. And yeah, it's been a pretty impressive performance from this team this race.
Glenn, with the riding moment control of these boats, what are you trying to achieve? In the lighter stuff, are you actually trying to reduce your riding moment component so that does that assist the boat to stay on the foils?
Not really, actually. What we're actually doing, you know, at the end of the day with these boats and the design of these boats is you're getting to maximum riding moment as soon as that hull clears the water, you're at maximum riding moment. So from there on, it's all about reducing drag. So, and the reduction in drag is being able to get the boat going faster, so you're not using a big flap down on the foil that's in the water. So you're basically retracting the flaps like you would on an aircraft after you've taken off to reduce drag. So that's what's happening in the water. As we get faster through the air, we're actually reducing the drag on the sail plan. So reducing the drag in the water, going faster, reducing the drag in the air, but remaining at a constant riding moment. So the weight of the boat, the weight of the crew, balancing to windward off that foil is the riding moment and the power, and from there on it's the management of the sail plan really that dictates how fast the boat goes through the water, and the autopilot keeps up from there to a large extent.
So one more tack for Emirates Team New Zealand. If they can get through this and stay up on the foils, they will be home and dry heading towards the upwind. Oh, and they've crashed and touched down.
But they've probably got enough speed, Hannah, just to cruise across the line. Emirates Team New Zealand, right before the glorious moment of crossing the finish line, drop off the foils, but it won't matter. They will crawl across the line. They'll be putting their mouths towards the sail and blowing it across the line just to get that maximum 10 points, because that's what will matter, because the top 2 teams at the end of the weekend of all the fleet races will sail off on a match race to decide who wins the inaugural regatta. Emirates Team New Zealand get across the line and will win race 2 of this preliminary regatta after being bested at the start by Alinghi Red Bull Racing.
That was a near perfect race there from Emirates Team New Zealand. Once they got themselves up on the foils, sort of halfway up that first leg, and managed to stay on the foils the whole way around till right before the finish there, Peter.
Heather, I think you put the mocker on them. I mean, once they got on the foils and getting the boat on the foils without the assistance of a chase boat, that was the game changer for me. And how they achieved that, that is technique. That is technique, and maybe just managing to find a little sail of wind that they could push the boat forward. But right at the end, you were giving them a bouquet, and what happens? Touchdown.
Considering what's happening with the rest of the fleet, that's a fine sail by Emirates Team New Zealand.
Yeah, for me, just being able to get the boat on the foil, repeating myself, without chase boat assistance. For Alinghi Red Bull Racing, what might have been. They managed the pre-start beautifully. That 3 minutes when they got chase boat release, they managed to reach and keep the boat on the foils. They were a little late to the start, but it didn't matter. Everyone else would touch down. And they did the first half of the race perfectly. But then one bad jibe, and they got rolled by Team New Zealand.
So come on, Glenn, you've been in these boats. What's the difference? What are Emirates Team New Zealand doing that the others are just struggling to match?
I think really, really solid technique and communication, getting the boat dug out of the water. These guys at Emirates Team New Zealand, they've done a lot of sailing together, and they've reviewed a lot of data from the whole program. Even the existing cup races that were at AC36. There's a huge amount of learning that can be done out of watching not even the exact same boats, but the techniques that are used to get these boats up and going. And I think even going back through some of that old footage, you can pick up some really good tricks of what to do and what not to do. And I think what Emirates Team New Zealand as a team have actually done today is really showcased the effort that they've put in, behind the scenes, and they executed that takeoff to perfection, right in a little tiny puff. But once they could dig the boat out, they had one trigger pull, they had one go at it, and they pulled it off. And that's experience. And these other teams didn't need much to get going, but we were right on that edge. And it was very, very interesting to see them take off. And once you take off, as I said before, once you get up, you're away.
So Emirates Team New Zealand get the win in race number 2. They get the full points. They get 10 for this one. They had 5 in the last race, and they pick up 15 points in total after 2 races.